Welcome, everyone. We're delighted to welcome alumni and friends to this online event today. And we're joined by participants not only from Africa or people based in Africa, but from around the world. So we have participants from the UK, the US, Indonesia, Jordan, Denmark, and the Netherlands. So a very big welcome to all of you. Through these online events, we aim to shine a light on the accomplishments of our alumni community, but also on Imperial research and partnerships. And we aim to connect you in new ways and to stimulate discussion. So I encourage everyone to use this platform today for a wider discussion about how STEM education can contribute to areas such as innovation and economic development. And up front, I'd just like to thank Professor Zati and our panelists who've taken the time to share their expertise and insights and to discuss with you today. Before I hand over to our chair, I'm going to just take you through a little bit of housekeeping. So you'll see there's a Q&A function in your toolbar, that's question and answers. So do pose your questions as we're going through the discussion, and others can highlight, you can give them a thumbs up. So you press the thumbs up and the most popular questions will be asked in priority. But we'll try to get through as many questions as we can in the time that we have available today. This has been recorded, so please don't share any personal information that you wouldn't want to share in your questions. We're happy if you put in your full name or if you just want to use your first name as well. So I am now going to hand over to Majid Zati. I'm very grateful that he's facilitating today. He's Professor in Global Environmental Health at Imperial. And Majid, over to you.
Thank you, Nicola. And my welcome also to our alumni and friends wherever in the world you are, and my welcome and thanks to our speakers. It's my absolute pleasure to be chairing today's event. Africa and mathematical sciences are both dear to me, and have in many ways shaped my own career. So I'm very pleased to be doing this. So AIMS, African Institute for Mathematical Sciences, is a network of centers of excellence throughout Africa. It serves really it pursues three missions. One is excellence in research. The other one is postgraduate training in mathematical sciences, and the last and equally important to the other two is policy and public engagement. The first center was established in 2003 in South Africa, and to actually promote study and research in sciences, technology, and mathematical sciences throughout Africa. We are going to hear from all of our speakers about AIMS in different aspects. So I'm not going to say more about it, but it's a true gem in I think in the world in terms of how it actually functions. And Imperial is excited, fortunate, and pleased to be engaging with AIMS and with AIMS researchers and students in a number of ways. There are a number of collaborations between the college and AIMS researchers. And our international office has made a point, and I can say this with genuinely, that with a lot of effort through our colleagues at international office and a lot of enthusiasm to provide resources and as much as the college could do to facilitate engagement of Imperial staff and students with colleagues and students at AIMS. So it's an important event, and I'm sure you will all find it interesting. So without saying more, I'm actually going to give really brief introductions to our speakers and ask them each to actually say a little bit more about their own backgrounds. So I'll start with our first speaker, Professor Neil Turok. Neil is an alumni of Imperial. He graduated in physics and is actually the founder of AIMS. Wilfred Ndifon, who is a professor of theoretical biology at AIMS and the network's research director, and Emily Muller, who actually is linked directly to both AIMS and Imperial. She studied at AIMS for her master's degree and she's now a PhD candidate in Imperial at the School of Public Health. So without actually further ado, I'm going to ask Neil to say more about himself, and then followed by Wilfred and Emily. Over to you, Neil.
Very much, Nicola and Majid. And thank you to all of you for attending this event. I think Imperial is an institution very dear to all of our hearts. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I was born to two activist parents in South Africa who both went to prison for fighting apartheid. And then we came to England as refugees. And eventually I came to Imperial to do my PhD. Since then I've progressed in particle physics and cosmology, which is my field of interest. Was very fortunate to work with people such as Stephen Hawking and others developing theories of the Big Bang. And that's still my day job, is I try to understand what really happened at the beginning of the universe. But the reason I started AIMS, I'll explain in a moment. But essentially, you know, my heart stayed in Africa, although I moved to the UK. And as I'll explain further, AIMS has been an incredible life experience for me. I've just taken up I tell you two brief things. I was director of the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics for the last 10 years in Canada. And that's now the largest center in the world for theoretical physics, fundamental theoretical physics, with about 200 researchers. And then the beginning of this month, I moved to the University of Edinburgh, where I am the Higgs Chair of Theoretical Physics. So I will be back in the UK and very much hope to further this interaction with Imperial and, of course, with Africa. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola, Majid, Anya, and everyone for organizing this event. I'm Wilfred Ndifon. I was born in Cameroon. I did my graduate studies in the US at Princeton, and my heart remained in Africa even while I was there. And so I returned to contribute to the development of science on the continent, and I'm very pleased to be doing this through AIMS. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the organisers for having me here. I'm really excited to share my experience as an AIMS alumni. I'm originally from South Africa, and I did my undergraduate studies at the University of Southampton in mathematics before returning to South Africa because my heart too was longing to be back in Africa. I did my master's at AIMS in applied mathematics before returning back to the UK, where I'm currently a PhD candidate in computer vision for urban analytics.
Okay, thank you all for the introductions, and it promises to be actually a very insightful and interesting set of discussions. So again, without saying much, I'm going to ask Neil to start by saying something that he has already hinted at and gotten our interest of why he started AIMS. Neil, over to you again.
So yes, I was a child in South Africa. My parents went to prison for fighting apartheid. And they are really the reason I started AIMS. We left South Africa after their release from prison. We went to East Africa. I did my primary school there and had so many wonderful experiences as a kid in Africa that you know, my affection for the continent was knew no limits, really. So throughout my high school in the UK, and I kept remembering Africa, and then I got a chance to go back and be a teacher in a high school in Lesotho, a small landlocked country, where I was exposed to kids with great talent, but very few opportunities. So finally I came back to the UK. I did my degree at Cambridge, PhD at Imperial. Eventually went to the US as a postdoc. Finally came back to Cambridge as a chair of theoretical physics. And that's when I had a chance to do something. So from Cambridge, I began to explore the possibility of creating a new type of educational center in Africa. And it's a long story, but basically we started from zero. We bought the building, we renovated it. I became, instead of a theoretical cosmologist, I became an entrepreneur and learned how to write a business plan and how to persuade people to contribute their money towards the enterprise. What I learned at Ames was just amazing, that Africa is the best place in the world to start a new university and actually to reinvent the whole notion of what a university is. And the reason for that is the exceptional motivation of the students and their diversity, cultural, religious, in all ways, their enormous diversity, their enormous enthusiasm. And so Ames became very quickly what we call a 24/7 learning environment, where the students basically spend all their time discussing, trying to solve problems, having ad hoc tutorials with visiting lecturers, and so on. So the most exciting possible academic environment. Examples of this, probably the best quantitative book on global warming is a book called Sustainable Energy Without the Hot Air, written by David Mackay, who sadly passed away a few years ago. But he wrote that book because he came to Ames, and the students were peppering him with questions about what is this global warming, what is the energy crisis, how do we really understand it? And that was so stimulating that he wrote this book, which became a classic. It's just one of the many amazing things that have happened at Ames, and Wilfred is going to tell you something more recent, which was initiated at Ames. So just to sum up, what Ames does is it creates an environment which I look at as being a return to the roots of what a university is. A university is nothing but a space where people can test their ideas with each other, explore knowledge, break boundaries. University is not defined by departments or institutional inertia, which of course are all too common in most universities today. A university is really a pure place for learning, for sharing ideas, for creating new knowledge. And what Ames has been designed to do is to give the students the confidence to challenge. So they come from very different backgrounds. Frequently, they're the first in their family or even their community to go to university and certainly to progress beyond first degree to master's and postgraduate study. And these students are incredibly motivated and they have a point to prove. And the point to prove, I mean, essentially it's what Black Lives Matter is about. But, you know, we started this in 2003. And the point to prove is a double one. One, that race is no barrier to achievement. And secondly, that this can happen in science. That science represents, in a sense, a certain pinnacle of human achievement, human intellectual achievement. And we need to break the barriers, the cultural, the psychological, the colonial barriers which have been put in place, because Africa has this incredible youthful demographic right now. In just a few decades, you know, most of the world's young people will be African. It has the largest, the most youthful population of anywhere on the planet. And so taking care of these young people is incredibly important. And the most important thing we can do is to give them the sense that there are opportunities for them and they can they can become the leaders of the future in all fields, and especially science, because that's so crucial to the future of the planet. So we've created AIMS, and we continue to create it as a place where we believe in the students, and we design the institution so that it allows them to outshine us. That's the spirit of AIMS, that each one of those students is potentially an Einstein, a Bill Gates, you know, an amazing person of great value to the whole world. Because we are essentially starting advanced scientific education and advanced research in Africa from fresh, you know, because Africa's gone through decades of isolation, disadvantage, loss of morale among African academics, because Africa suffered from all that so badly, underfunding, you name it, all the disadvantages you can have. We're essentially starting from fresh. And this allows you to do things in new ways. And so rather than replicate Western universities, you can actually do things in far more efficient and effective ways. And so that makes AIMS enormous fun. And the students we've graduated, we've just had our graduation this year. There are now something like 2,250 alumni at master's level and above. In general, they are very successful. They have no problem finding employment. And among them are some very brilliant young people who may actually change the fields in which they work. So that's all I want to say, and I greatly welcome you know, any questions.
Thank you, Neil. And so I'm going to ask actually, so the questions, you can type them in the question area. I'm going to ask Wilfred to talk about research at AIMS. Neil gave what I think is a very refreshing perspective on the philosophy of AIMS, and I wish that all of our higher education administrators in the UK and in the Northern Hemisphere would actually hear this vision. So Wilfred will talk about research, and he will use the example of his own work on testing for COVID-19 with the government of Rwanda to illustrate the fantastic research that's happening at AIMS. Wilfred, over to you.
Thanks, Majid. So as scientists, we usually want to be left alone to explore the wonders of nature. There's joy in discovering something new about nature, how it's structured, how it functions. But also, as scientists in Africa, we want to be useful to society in other ways. So this curiosity-driven exploration of nature itself is very useful. To my mind, the usefulness is clear. But its usefulness is not always apparent, and it may manifest on relatively long time scales. We live in a world with many problems, and in Africa we see some of these problems on a daily basis. And we feel it's part of our duty to help society address some of these problems. Especially because for many of these problems, good solutions will not come from anywhere else but from science. And at AIMS we are we're developing enormously useful resources, both in terms of the human talent that we're nurturing and in the new knowledge and tools that we're creating through our research. So it's natural that we would want to apply this knowledge, these tools, to address some of the challenges that society faces, especially something that's as transformative to society as the ongoing pandemic. So we have been, our research focuses on pure maths and at the interface between mathematics and a number of different fields. So health, for example, cosmology, and other areas. And we've been quite active in health, which is what I'm going to focus on because that's quite topical. We've been helping the continent respond to COVID-19. In Senegal, for example, we have our researchers who are part of the task force And our contributions are mostly in terms of applying mathematical modeling to help structure people's thinking about how the disease is progressing, what might happen next, how effective are the interventions that are being put in place. In Rwanda, we have, even before the pandemic, we had a very cordial relationship with the Ministry of Health of Rwanda. In the past, they have invited us to give our perspectives on a number of issues that relate to mathematical sciences. The country as a whole is very forward-thinking. So when they make plans, they want to get perspectives from people who have expertise in different areas that could be useful to them. And so at AIMS, we are seen as the experts in mathematical sciences more generally, but especially in fields like machine learning and data science, which are increasingly important to the way the government manages public health. And so we'd had in the past some joint projects with the Ministry of Health through what is called the Rwanda Biomedical Center, which is the main implementing agency of the Ministry of Health. And so during the pandemic, I was drawn into discussions on some theoretical issues useful for the response, and ended up together with a team of PhD students and postdocs at AIMS, providing advice on modeling, so mathematical epidemiological models. Our team have been making projections to inform operational planning for the response to COVID-19. But while doing this, because I have a background also in developing tools for doing biological measurements, I was also thinking about the testing process. So how are these data collected? And it was obvious to me that pooling samples would improve efficiency. Now, this was very early in the pandemic, and essentially, I didn't know of anyone who was applying pooling to COVID-19 at the time. And so the AIMS, my colleagues, my students and postdocs approached those who were responsible for testing within the task force. And in particular, I was introduced to someone called Leon Mutesa, who is a professor of human genetics at the University of Rwanda, and also a member of the COVID-19 task force. So now, to give you some background about how we went about presenting an idea on how to do pooling and scale-up testing, and actually implementing that, and I need to give you just a small background on how the government has been responding to the pandemic. So even before the first case of COVID-19 was confirmed in Rwanda, the government had already been making plans. And in fact, soon after the first case was confirmed, the government acted quickly and imposed a lockdown. It was the first country in Africa to have a lockdown. And the response from then on was quite well organized. They have a task force that's organized into different teams with different responsibilities. They pulled into the team, into these different teams, people with expertise that would make it possible for them to contribute. And some of these are from AIMS. So we have AIMS, people from the AIMS community who are part of this task force contributing to the different activities. And you have standard operating procedures which say this is how you do things, and you learn from what you've done, what works, what doesn't work, you update these procedures. And so to introduce massive testing using pooling, you had to follow this very structured process. You have to develop a plan, and you convince those who make decisions about which procedures to adopt that this is worthwhile. Fortunately, so we did this. We had a plan, and we had to discuss with the Minister of Health this plan. And it was very accessible because it's not unusual to go to visit the task force and find him working, on the details of the response. And so he understood the implications of what we presented, and then approved it at his level and had it approved by the cabinet. And so we had to go ahead to implement pool testing. Now, pool testing, it turns out, is a very old field. It was invented in the 1940s. Now, this is what we have on record as the first application, but it's such a simple idea that you can imagine that it would have been reinvented thousands of times if no one had written anything about it. And so there is a traditional way of doing pool testing, which is essentially you take, if I have 1,000 people to test, the naive approach would be to do 1,000 tests, but this is very expensive, and especially in a resource-constrained setting like the one we find ourselves in. And so you need to pool samples to save on costs. Now, one way to do this is simply to divide the samples into groups, perform one test per group, and then you find the groups that test positive, and you test each person that's in that group. Okay, this is as originally described, this is how pool testing was being implemented. So at Ames, we had a small team, essentially a team of two, myself and Neil, thinking about how we can do this differently. And so we came up with an alternative approach. So instead of testing each person in the positive group, you actually can do something more smart, which is to think of these samples within this group as existing in some volume, in some higher dimensional space. And in this space, we assign coordinates to these samples. And then we slice through this space and test slices. And it turns out that by doing this, if there's one person in this volume who's positive, we can pinpoint that person. And if there are more people, we can actually identify them. And we've analyzed this approach mathematically, and we can provide guarantees. So we can say if we do slice the volume in a particular way, this is the probability that we're going to miss an infected individual. And typically we can reduce this probability to a very, very small number. So essentially, in principle, we can always find an infected person, but we can reduce the number of tests, the number of rounds of tests we do. We can make it faster and still ensure that with a very high probability, we always get these infected individuals. So this is an approach to scaling up testing so that you find infected people, but you don't spend a lot of money. And this is very important because the virus is very transmissible. And if you just need a single infection that goes unnoticed to seed an outbreak within a community. And when this grows, then it becomes more difficult to manage. If you can do massive testing regularly, like we're now doing in Rwanda, then you can catch these new infections quickly before they seed large outbreaks. And in that way, you keep the cost of controlling the pandemic quite low, manageable even for a resource-constrained environment like in Rwanda. So this is essentially the one of the, in fact, the main contribution we've made towards supporting the country to respond more efficiently in a more intelligent way to the virus. And the country has been remarkably successful at keeping the virus under relative control. Comparatively very few cases, very few deaths, and this massive testing continues to ensure that the prevalence is kept at a very low level. I want to mention a number of individuals who've been very helpful for this. The solutions to the big problems we face, they lie in science, right? But we need to give science the space to act in the public good, in the interest of everyone, in order for science to play that role, right? And so in Rwanda, we are fortunate that we've been collaborating with a government that is very responsive to ideas from the mathematical sciences. So we write equations on the board, find solutions, and go and talk to them about these things, and they don't think of us as crazy people. They listen, and they actually understand that this can be useful to them. And so the Minister of Health and the Director General of the Rwanda Biomedical Center, I want to say they have been exemplary. They have acted in an exemplary way in being responsive to the science coming from AIMS. Yeah, so that's in a nutshell what we've been doing to support the response to COVID-19 through massive testing. Thank you.
Thank you, Wilfred. I actually think you were rather downplayed the range of innovations that are coming in Africa in the case of the COVID. I think things like pool testing, the double testing that's happening in Ghana, and a number of other things. I think much of Europe has a lot to learn from Africa in terms of how to manage the pandemic. With that, I'm going to ask Emily to actually talk about having been a student at AIMS and now being at Imperial doing a PhD, the experiences and the preparations that AIMS provided her with. Emily, over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for the Neil and Wilfred as well for your talks. They were really interesting. I guess I can start with the opportunity. So I really think that AIMS opened my eyes to the possibilities that were available to me with my skill set, having done an undergrad in mathematics. So I had one tutor there called Georg, who was a set theorist, and he used to say that mathematics has 3 stages. So the pre-rigorous, when you're in high school and you kind of are just learning about objects and operations, the rigorous in undergrad when you're doing pages and pages of integrals and Gaussian eliminations, and then the post-rigorous where you get to play. And at AIMS, I was really able to play. I studied quantum field theory, atmospheric modeling, data science, information theory. So I really explored all of these different topics, which I didn't know really were available to me. So that was really, really eye-opening in terms of opportunity. And Neil's already touched on the style of learning, and just it was a rapid skill development period. It's 10 months intensive work. And the way that it's set up is really to remove other obligations that you might have in your life, like cooking yourself food and cleaning your room and sorting out your own accommodation. So you've got all of this time in your life to really just dedicate to thinking. And so we call it the mathematical monastery, the yellow building on the beach in Cape Town. And every now and again you can take a walk, and you know, if you've ever been to Cape Town, there's this beautiful, beautiful coastline that AIMS actually sits on, from Muizenberg all the way down to the bottom of the peak. So I was really dedicated, and also the assignments would take so long. You'd spend like 10 hours on assignment. You had to do 2 of these every single weekend, one for Friday, one for Saturday. So your weekends were gone. Forget about your social life, forget about doing anything else but studying and working on your project. But the way in which we worked was totally different. So rather than kind of like sitting exams, we would get together and like group around this problem and talk about our different skill sets. Like there were physicists at Ames, there were people that had done applied mathematics, pure mathematics, and everybody kind of had a different perspective and would be able to like share and learn from one another. You'd kind of walk around the building at 10 o'clock and somebody would be hosting a tutorial about something that they're interested in somewhere in the building. So it was a really, really powerful experience. And I'd never coded in Python, for example, before joining Ames. I didn't really understand what research was before joining Ames, actually. I think I was quite disillusioned from my undergraduate experience because it wasn't really trying to like understand the problem, it was just trying to do the exam. I'm very grateful that it gave me the way of conceptualizing ideas for mathematics that I was able to like develop further at Ames. And after Ames really sets students up for like a lot of experiences to go to do further studies. So I don't know what the statistics are, but I'm aware that there are a lot of students that do go on to do whether it's PhDs, further research. And I think I was really sold on that route. So I knew that I wanted to like continue in research, and I started kind of broadening my community after Ames and exploring other communities within Africa. So I was doing data science summer school at CSIR for a few months, and then also got introduced to the deep learning Indaba, and I kind of decided that these were my people, like the data scientists and machine learners. And then one day I got an email from one of those communities, and it had this job for a research assistant at Imperial, and it really invoked something in me which was like, I've got to go for that job, gotta go for that job. And by the grace of many, many, many people, Neil being one of them, Majid being another one of them, I found myself in that role. And again, like dropped into this really diverse environment, working with people from different countries, working from people from different disciplines, epidemiologists, physicians, statisticians, so many different, just diverse range of people, and learning how to just conceptualize the problems together with all these different viewpoints. And I think the final and most powerful thing which Ames really delivered was the seed. So Ames really plants the seed to understand, like, what can you do for your community and what can you do for the people on the continent. And I think I always love hearing Neil speak, because it's so wild to think about one person having an idea and then getting all these other people together and having this huge impact on, I know on my life, but I know on so many other people's lives. So if each one of the 2,200 Ames alumni also have a seed, have an idea, and can plant that further, it's a really, really powerful effect. So I'd end there.
Thank you, Emily. So I can say that, although I sort of knew all of the stories of the three speakers, I found every one of them rather electrifying, hearing it again. So thank you for very motivating presentations on vision, on research, and on training at Ames. So I'm going to go to questions to our audience, and please do put your questions. And so I'm going to start, and for those who have put their names, I'll mention who asked the question. So we have a question from Tim Weiss, and thank you for the fascinating presentation. And I'm going to ask you all to sort of react to this briefly, because I think it is relevant to all of you from different perspectives. So Tim is asking, can you elaborate a bit more on how Ames is organized differently from either comparable or alternative institutions in the US and Europe, that to provide in a short time this, I think, great environment for both mentoring, training, and for research? over to you all. So perhaps we go in the reverse order of how we started. So Emily from the perspective of a student, and Neil from the perspective of, and Wilfred, active researcher there, and Neil, the founder of it. That sort of its organization and structure, and what there is and what there isn't that makes it so great.
Sure, thank you for the question. So I think the element of having people available to just talk through problems at almost any time was really, really powerful. For example, I met my supervisor at that time in the lunch queue, and we struck up a conversation about networks. And then I walked across the road and he gave me a bunch of books. And so it was a very, very close communication, very intimate environment in which I could learn. And that was the case with a lot of visiting lecturers and tutors. Tutors are really, really hands-on and available and want to learn as well with you. You know, it's not only about like teaching you, they're also there to learn and to discover things for themselves. So I can definitely say the intimate teaching environment is a huge part of that.
Yeah, so in terms of researchers, we have very few strict requirements on what they could do. The only expectation is that they strive to be the best in whatever they're working on. So we want to be in any area we're researching, we want to be among the very best institutions who are working in that area. That is it, but the researchers don't have a requirement to teach. I mean, it would be nice if they teach, and if they teach something that they're working on, so something they're really passionate about. They don't have some fixed courses that they must, some number of credits that they must teach every year, like you'd find in other institutions. Then we have the students that we're training from our master's program, who can then can work on the research projects that our researchers are working in. So there is this talent of these young people who are eager to learn, very motivated to learn, to contribute to projects, and they're available for researchers to mentor and work with. So it's an environment that is quite open. We encourage conversation, communication across disciplinary boundaries. In fact, we don't have disciplinary boundaries within AIMS. Everything we see as being connected. Math is a common language that we all try to speak, and so it's quite different from what a young researcher will encounter as a junior faculty in some leading university, for example. I think there is a competitive advantage that we have at AIMS. Thanks.
Yeah, let me just add a little bit. I think Emily and Wilfred have summed it up beautifully. When we started AIMS, it was an experiment. And so let me emphasize that the whole nature of AIMS is it's an experimental organization. We know what the goal is. The goal is to enable brilliant young scientists to emerge from Africa. But we will adopt whatever method is the most effective in reaching that goal. So everything is open to revision. We try to avoid any hierarchy, any sense of hierarchy, precisely because we want these young people to overturn established ways of doing things and to come up with better ways. So at AIMS, we tried from the beginning to create a very open, flat environment, flat hierarchy, where any student can talk to any professor at any time. People eat together, they spend their evenings together. The students, one of the many names the students have for AIMS is the House of No Sleep, where people are just very intensively trying to make the most of this extraordinary opportunity without the previous barriers they had. So, and then Wilfred talked about competitive advantage. You know, when you think about creating a top quality institution, education and research institution in Africa, what are your advantages? Well, money is not one of them. Okay, money is hard to come by. But what you do have are the students who are really highly motivated. And so anybody's notions that African students are lazy, you know, are dispelled in 5 minutes at Ames. It's the absolute opposite. They will work day and night to solve whatever problem you give them. So in fact, what happens is in this environment, which is completely driven by the students, you know, the staff take a background role. The director's job is just enabling. I mean, there's no sense of top down. It's all, you know, allowing the young people to find their way and to drive the future. So you will, just as an example, we tried out examinations at Ames. You know, most universities have moved more and more towards standardized testing and essentially becoming a factory where you turn out students with the same degree. The quality, frankly, has gone down. I know this because I taught at Cambridge, and you know, by fiat, 30% of the students now get first-class degrees at Cambridge in mathematics. It's insane. You know, a first-class degree does not represent what it used to. Instead, the faculty are sort of forced to write questions which they know the students, you know, with a certain amount of study will be able to answer sometimes in parrot learning fashion. So we explored examinations at Ames. We tried tests, how to do them in such a way that you don't terrorize the students, because you know what happens in Africa, because the universities have been disadvantaged for decades, all of the diseases of Western academia are amplified by 100 times, and so they become much more obvious. So when exams are set in African universities, too often it's just rote learning, and then you know the grade it can be somewhat arbitrary anyway, depending on whether the lecturer likes you or doesn't like you. And so they've got into, you know, bad ways of operating, which we had to break. And so at Ames, we're very determined to get away from parrot-style learning towards thinking for yourself. So the examinations became oral, you know, questioned by the tutors in a friendly environment. There's no written exam at the end of the course. Instead, the students produce a thesis, which is their own research work. And quite often these end up with a publication. So we've explored this. I don't say we found the perfect solutions, but what we have revealed is the deficiencies of the normal academic system and the way it's going. And what we want to do is set an example that the best way of teaching students worldwide should be pioneered in Africa. The other competitive advantage is because people are so interested in Africa, we can get the best lecturers in the world to come to Africa. And I know this because I've done it many times. You call someone up cold, you say, you are widely respected as the best lecturer in machine learning or AI or bioinformatics, some hot field. Come to Africa for 3 weeks. Live with the best students in Africa for 3 weeks. Just share your ideas. There's no fixed curriculum. So just teach the most important and fascinating ideas. And they come. So Ames has the best faculty of any institution in the world. We just launched a course in machine learning and AI. And just look at the faculty. It's all the founders of the field who come to Africa to teach. Okay. And then the students who've taken that course are doing fantastically well. They're all, quickly snapped up by Google and Facebook and Microsoft and so on, because like Emily, they've really been turned on. So I think AIMS is essentially a new model for universities, small, what's the word? Almost like a boutique university, right? Like those small hotels where they take special care of you. It's more like that. It's not expensive. It's not expensive at all. And it is highly, highly effective. And the students who come through will change whatever field they go on to.
Thank you to all of you again for why AIMS is as great as it is. So I'll just add to that. When I was long ago a PhD student, I had a professor who used to say, look, this was in the 90s when just about every country in the world was making the same sort of bad economic policies. They said, do you know why they all make the same bad economic policies? Because they all studied at the same university. So they would be going to Oxford and Cambridge and Sorbonne, or to great American universities, and they all think the same way. And to actually have a place that people aren't made copies of their mentors is actually a great idea. So our next question, and I'll modify the question a little bit. It's an anonymous question. So a question asked about the gender split of students, but I'm actually going to ask Wilfred to address this so that we have time for more questions. What's the gender split of the students at AIM, both applying and completing at AIMS, but also the faculty? And I guess, how are you going to make sure, speaking of not repeating all of the bad things that happened in northern universities, that actually the great sort of power of African women is also represented at AIMS? Wilfred, over to you.
So we have, it's about 30% for the faculty, for the students at the structured master's level, and also the research students. We train also research masters and PhD students. So it's approximately 30%. For the faculty, currently we have a nucleus of a faculty that we've just started, and that we intend to grow. And so our objective is to have 50% female representation at all levels. And so to ensure that we arrive at that we also helping to build the pipeline of students who come into AIMS at earlier levels. We're engaging with high school students through teaching. So we are improving the methods that are used to teach at the lower levels. So that students are more interested, more excited about maths, and that more female students enter the field. Because concepts, you can take a concept that's simple and you teach it. If you teach it badly, it might appear to be quite difficult to a student. So we want to reduce these barriers to entry for women at the lower levels, so that there are more women applying, young girls applying to AIMS and getting into the institution. And we are also creating, in terms of research, we're creating special opportunities for women. So, for example, there's the big issue about climate change, and we know women are more negatively affected by climate change across Africa, especially in developing countries. And so we have created fellowships for women only. So we get really outstanding applicants for these fellowships. And we give them the award for a year. And they propose to us, to get the award, they have to propose a problem, which is reviewed by a very good committee with leading international experts. And then we give them the funds, give them the support, and they address these problems. So we working to support women in different ways.
Thank you, Wilfred. So,
yeah.
so I guess just to get through more questions, and again, Africa has had a great history in this. Uganda was one of the first countries to actually mandate that a certain share of the members of the parliament are actually female, and it was great, and Nobel Prizes obviously for peace from Kenya and so on and so on. So I'll go to, so again, I'll ask this question, perhaps this one I'll ask from Neil, and then I'll have a question for Emily after this one. So Neil, I guess brief answer perhaps, so that we can get to more questions. So a question that has come up again, anonymous, that Africa is a very large, and a very diverse continent. There are different political situations, different cultures, different languages, and what's actually the key to AIM's success to be Pan-African? So if you could briefly answer this, and I have the next question ready for Emily after that. Over to you, Neil.
Yes, sure. So Africa is the world's most diverse continent, more languages, more cultures than any other. But I think the key is that all across Africa, there have been similar problems, namely colonialism, division of the continent into countries which actually made no sense culturally. And so it's for this reason, it was crucial when we started AIMS to conceptualize it as a Pan-African institution. So we take that very seriously. So there are now 5 AIMS centers in different countries in Africa. Every center has a student body of about 50 who take the core AIMS Masters program. And when we select those students, we always ensure that there's representation from all regions of the continent. So every student cohort is absolutely Pan-African. And that's when the real magic happens. You know, you get a student from the Congo, one from Madagascar, one from Algeria. And, you know, when they get together, this is such a growth experience for them and for their lecturers to see everyone brought together by maths and by science. You know, this is, I think, had been too little appreciated, that science is the great global unifier. You know, it's not just a technical tool we use to make products and build industries and all that. It actually brings all the cultures of the world together. And where better to do that but Africa? So this was one of the amazing things we learned, is you take a student from Cameroon or Egypt or whatever, you bring them into the same room. They all want the same thing. They want to understand. They want to know, how does the world work? This is really incredibly exciting. It's part of discovering who we are and what unifies us. You know, it's really interesting.
Thank you, Neil. The only thing I would say, one shouldn't do that during African Cup of Nations football matches. So that's when it actually just does, you know, the sort of energy and competitiveness gets into that. So to Emily, this one. So this is actually, again, anonymous, but a student doing a PhD in the UK, and they are asking that they feel that there is still a large communication and collaboration gap between students. So this is not senior researchers, students in northern universities and in Africa. And what they're asking is that, what are your thoughts about this? Is this just inherent, or is this something else? And how do you see this gap? How do you see students working a lot more together rather than senior researchers? So Emily, over to you.
That's a very interesting question, and I imagine if I hadn't returned to South Africa, I might be asking something really similar, actually. I was recently chatting with somebody about, in wake of Black Lives Matter, about like the community of people that are working in machine learning, and it was really, really fascinating to me that they didn't know any people working in machine learning that were Black or, you know, African or in the diaspora. And I was like, wow, those are like most of the people that I know in that community. So I think it's very much to do with like who you're connected to, which windows are open to you to hear. So if you're in like machine learning AI, the Deep Learning Endeavor is an incredible conference which brings people from around the world together. So again, you're exchanging with people that maybe usually if you did something in in Europe, you wouldn't get the opportunity to. And I must say, like, maybe my experience is not quite the same, because at Imperial we do have very close relationships with the University of Ghana, and we get the opportunity to work and talk and become friends with the students that are there. But I would say it's just about keeping your channels open and really trying to find out where the networks are of the people that are doing things that you're also interested in, and understanding how they do it, how your skills might be able to assist in that, and taking time and doing the research to find the people that you're interested in.
Thank you, Emily. So I'll pose the next question, and I'll ask any of the speakers who wants to speak to actually talk about it. So an anonymous, I guess, member of our audience has asked, in the light of Black Lives Matter, what advice would you give to Africans in the diaspora who want to return as scientists to the continent? And then they also asked that how do you encourage African students and early career researchers to stay on the continent? And I guess I'll put it in this way, which is that, again, in the 80s and 90s, many of the great students from Asia who were studying in the West would decide to stay. 20 years later, the greatest ones actually go back to their countries, and they just say, this is a better thing, this is a better life, this is a better career. And so when are we going to be there? And what does it take for actually people saying that, it's not just a sense of service. I'm here because this is the greatest career I can have. And how do we make AIMS and other institutions that have in Africa to actually become those magnets?
I think Wilfred can answer that one.
Yeah, so I think this is a very important question. The answer depends also on the disposition of the person. Okay, for some people it's a no-brainer that they would come and work. They want to come and work and stay in Africa. For others, they need some convincing. And I think the case for coming and staying is growing stronger as the countries provide better environments, peaceful environments to live and work in. You can't work very effectively if there is a war, there's conflict where you are. I'll give you the example of Rwanda. I think it's a very good place to work. Ghana and a number of other countries, really, they are providing conducive environments for people to work in. And if you're interested really in solving problems that have an impact on people's lives, then I think Africa really is the best place to do that, because the opportunities are just huge. There are countless opportunities. If you have, if you look, your eyes are open and you look around you, you observe well, you would see those opportunities. They are just lying around. And so I think there are some personal considerations that come into this. And also concerning African, so people who are in the diaspora, it's quite unfortunate that many of them are actually not in environments that are, psychologically speaking, very conducive for doing good science. Okay, so there are many places in Africa that provide much better environments than some of the places in the West. So they need to take this into account and be honest to themselves about what they really want to achieve. But I think there's room for further improvements in the living conditions on the continent, especially ensuring that people live in peace and that people have opportunities to explore their desires, to explore the things they want, to contribute to their society, their communities in ways that are constructive. to society. Yeah.
Can I add something, Majid?
Go ahead, Neil, if quickly, because I want to get two other related questions in. So go ahead.
Yeah, very quickly. So yeah, we want to turn the world upside down, right? So Africa has been left out of science by and large, but now is the time for it to lead. And you cannot overstate the importance of pioneering developments in Africa. Wilfred, as you rightly pointed out, Majid, was quite modest when he described the pool testing approach, because actually it is world leading. And just wanted to mention that, you know, last week, Wilfred received an email from one of the heads of a top laboratory in the US that is implementing COVID testing. And basically this person said, very interested in your work. We'd like to collaborate. Can you guide us in how we implement pool testing in our lab? Because the last maths I took was at high school. Okay, so this is indeed turning things around. And wouldn't that be amazing? I think, won't it be amazing when a medical innovation in Africa is then tested and trialed in the US? This is a complete turnaround. And I think this will happen more and more. And in the end, that's what will persuade the best researchers to go and work in Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. So just that I keep finding myself reminding many of my colleagues and friends that some countries in Africa have been independent countries for a shorter time than we have been alive, and actually how well things are going in many ways. Places like Ghana, as you mentioned, Tanzania, Rwanda, are actually quite impressive. So I'm going to get two questions in together, and there are a lot of really good questions, but these ones I feel I have to ask. So one question from Kemi, who is asking that I'm listening along alongside my teenage children, and we were wondering whether there is going to be plans for engagement with younger Africans, high school age, so that they can actually get to the pipeline. But then the other side of this question is a question that is anonymous, saying that you are talking about young leaders, young innovators. What are going to be the opportunities for mid-career people to return and learn? So taking these two sort of not ends, but sort of outside the range that AIMS is currently actually targeting, age ranges, what can happen? I mean, I know you are doing so well in some sense that everybody wants more, but I think with the momentum to be there. So rather than saying whether you plan to do it, I'm going to ask it, what does it take to do this? What does it take from the perspective of colleagues overseas, from the perspective of donors, if they actually get their priorities right, and all of those to actually make these additional things happen. I'm going to ask any of you to react to these, and I apologize again for all the questions that were then asked, but then after this, I'll pass it over to Nick again.
So let's see, do you want me to respond?
You, Neil, Wilfred, and Emily begin sort of younger and older, younger in career and more advanced in career, please.
Okay. So yes, AIMS was focused on a very particular niche, which is postgraduate, the first year after undergraduate, because we saw there are about 1 million graduates per year in Africa. And most of them face unemployment after they graduate. So we thought if we can focus on that group, recruit from among them the very brightest, then we have a chance to demonstrate something. So it's been a very focused initiative, and one way of saying it, why it has succeeded, is we were a bit under the radar. There have been huge efforts in school education and primary education. In fact, the UN, until not so long ago, the UN only in the original Millennium Development Goals, they only mentioned primary education. It just wasn't a priority to support even secondary school education in Africa. And many people have said, oh, Africans don't need higher education. They just need, food and sustenance. So we were combating that, but we flew a little bit under the radar. And therefore, we weren't subject to the same, if you like, patronizing mentality, which affects all these other areas. You know, AIMS is not about the Western world, you know, being generous to Africa. Not at all. It's about scientists in the Western world seeing the next great pool of untapped talent and wanting to enable it, because the science needs Africa. Science needs driven young people who are going to change the world, and there are more of them in Africa than anywhere else. And there are other reasons. But so these other areas you mentioned, mid-career opportunities for Africa to return, or school-level Africans, they're extremely important areas. But to some extent, what I don't see there is enough fresh ideas. And I think, quite frankly, the last thing Africa needs is for the school models of Western Europe, let's say the UK, to be exported to Africa. You know, we don't need that. My daughter suffered from the school system in England, and I wouldn't impose that on Africa. So I think it really needs some new thinking and some ways of enabling African kids to come through. As Wilfred said, we try to do our part. AIMS is running teacher training programs. We keep trying to reimagine how to do these more effectively. But I would say AIMS is not, you know, has no special ideas in that direction. We're focused on this niche where we want to get young African scientists to, you know, to change their disciplines, and that's where we think we can succeed. So AIMS should not do everything. It needs to focus on what it does and do it the best. Hopefully, inspire other people to do things in other areas.
Thank you, Neil. Emily or Wilfred, would you like to add to Neil's answer?
I guess I can just add, like, I shudder to think of the South African higher education system and kind of the requirements that are in place currently for mathematics education. And I know that Imperial are introducing their mathematics sixth form. I'm not sure if that's this year or next year, but the ability to have like tailored learning for people that are really, really curious in mathematics at that level would just be something so incredible. I was really fortunate in the UK. I was in a class of a state school in London. There was only 3 other people that were studying further maths in the same class as me. So it was like this incredible learning opportunity. And if I've got that curiosity ready, to feed that in a really nurturing way. So I would definitely say that South Africa, I'm not sure, I can't say anything on other African countries, but South Africa would benefit from a big restructuring of the mathematics requirements from a matric level.
Thank you. And Wilfred, would you like to add?
No.
Okay, thanks. So hopefully AIMS will be actually the beginning of the next Einstein and the next Rosalind Franklin, just to make sure that the gender aspect of it goes. Over to you, Nicola and Anya, for, I guess, closing the session. Thanks to all our alumni for joining us.
Thank you. That was absolutely riveting. And I'm sorry, Stephen, who I met in Cape Town earlier this year when we were still, I just got out, I think, in time for traveling back to Europe, though I didn't realize it at the time. So it was just riveting. And I just thank you so much for participating and sharing your insights and your time with us today. I saw Neil present, I think it was in January at Imperial, and it was riveting then, and it is today. And what's great is that we've able to bring it to a much wider audience. So I'm sorry we've run over time, but we really felt it was worthwhile. We haven't got to all your questions, but part of this type of event is also to help you connect with the expertise and with the people afterwards. So Stephen, please contact Neil and Wilfred and Emily, and please others. There were lots of other questions, and it was just so interesting, and I thank you very much. We will be putting a survey in the Q&A function now, I think it is, at the end, so please complete that. There will be a recording which you can listen to again if you joined late, as I believe a few people did. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all again, wish you all the best, and just wish you all the very best, and thank you for joining today. Thank you.